Well, thank you, Barrett. I'm assuming everyone can hear me nowadays. It's all good. Um, so let me fast forward here into the PowerPoint. We'll go through that, get this out of the way. The idea here is to take a quick review of what Autodesk Docs is, the construction cloud in general. And then we'll take a look at today's topic, which is administering the Docs environment. So I'll do a couple of quick slides just to detail those keys, and then we'll just jump right in. I guess first, what is Autodesk Docs? Why do we even have it? Well, it's typically used as a way to centralize data in a project environment. So as Barrett mentioned, a central data environment for a given project. So that allows people to work outside the office. That allows you to connect people from other offices. It allows you to work with people that are outside your company, right? You can keep stretching that boundary because ultimately the data is in the cloud. And as long as you've got an internet connection of some sort, you have access to the data. It also provides versioning. It provides a great example of how to manage data in general, which is not something the construction industry in general is good at, is managing data. We also have multiple different versions of things that we email around. And so this is a great answer to that problem. So here's the big picture. Docs is the platform or the foundation for other construction cloud products that we've talked about in the past, and of course we'll continue to talk about in the future. And for today, we're not talking about how to use any of the different features within the Docs platform, but simply how to get it set up, how to configure it, how to provide the right arrangement of details as you go to set up your projects. So here are my keys. First, let's figure out where the heck we're even going. Where are the account and project admin areas? Secondly, we've got to add people to projects into the account, and what's the difference? Once we've added folks, we need to pay attention to permissions, subscriptions, and roles so that people naturally flow into the right permissions and responsibilities in a given project. Then we'll take a look at creating a simple project and the different areas that you might take advantage of, so like files, issues, and reviews. Ultimately, what one person would then want to do is, after a few projects, is create a template out of that project, so that simplifies startup. And then, of course, as we're working on projects, let's monitor it for its health. Let's take a look at the activity. What about notifications when things happen? And then something called bridge, so sort of the monitoring aspect. So I'm classifying that broadly as Docs administration. That supports two role types. So the account administrator, which is sort of the global across the board administrator, and then project admins, which have access to do things inside of the project only. So let's take a look at some of those tactics, if you will. So let's go ahead and jump into the browser. All of the administration happens from a web browser. I'm using Chrome, but you could use Edge. I haven't tried other browsers, but generally, if it's built on that Chromium engine, it should work fine. So typically, one of the first things you have to do is to get your account activated. One of two things happen. You'll either start a trial or you'll just simply access it using your manage area. So that's what this little screen is showing. So for instance, if I were in manage.autodesk.com, I've got access to a bunch of different projects or products. Sorry, I'll say the right word here in a moment. And then of course, we're looking for docs, right? So there we go. So you would simply click access, and then it would start that provisioning process the first time you do this. The other way that happens is sometimes people will start it from, the web page, which here we go. There's a button right here that says start free trial. So I've actually started it from that method because maybe you haven't purchased it yet or not sure how to even get started, but this seems like a simple way to get going. So many people start from here, even if they've already paid for it. What does that look like when you click that button? It starts going, and eventually it throws you into a view that looks like this. It'll throw you into a sample project in the project admin already out of the gate. So that's where it starts you, but let's back up the truck a little bit. And I want to go to the account admin. This upper left-hand area is typically what we refer to as the module selector. So I'm going to select the account admin module. And there you can, of course, see my list of current projects. You can also see my account name. That's a fantastic account name. So we probably want to edit that too, right? What are we going to do here in this area? First, I wanted to identify locations of where we're going. So as I mentioned, in this module selector, we can go to the account admin. Once we are in a project, the module selector gives us an additional option there to go to the project admin. So those are our two key areas today. Let me start back at the account admin area. And generally we work top down in this left-hand navigation. So we would add a member. So currently I'm highlighted. The member panel that shows up over here shows me information about that particular member in this account. So let me add another member. I've got a sample person here. These are personas I use for my training labs. So I type in the email address or copy and paste if you've got it, an Excel document up maybe. And I'm simply going to click add. And just like that, I've added that person to the account. If I click on the person, I can assign them to a company. Or if they were part of a different company, let's say Prime Architects, I could create a company in my account called Prime Architects. And now they're assigned to that company. The company, the role, the access level, these all play into how that particular individual has access to various parts of a given project and or the account. The company doesn't necessarily drive anything, but the access level can drive, can give them account administrator access. The role can give them various permissions within a project. So I'll make this person an architect for the moment. There we go. The status says not invited because I haven't actually invited that person to a project. I've simply added them to the account. Now you can certainly do that. Adding people, pretty straightforward, clicking add members and going through the different properties there. The one account administrator access level is pretty straightforward. There's a second access level called executive that provides options for those individuals to see data across projects. So scheduling, are we on schedule? Do we have more issues on this project than another project? Kind of stepping out of the individual project and looking at issues across all of the particular accounts projects. All right, so once you go through adding your members, that's nice and set up. I can slide down here to companies, and now you can see there is the company I just added. Now, at the moment, pretty straightforward. I haven't done anything other than create that company. Roles, this is where we define usage for a project. This is the out of the box list of roles, but you can certainly customize this list. Maybe I'm only a design firm. Maybe I don't need a superintendent, so I can remove that role. Let's say I need to add a role, maybe architectural lead or something. I don't know, I'm making up words now. Architect, good Lord, architectural lead. Anyway, once you type whatever the role you want, you hit add, and now it's available in that list. So before I go on, let me just make sure there's no questions or comments. Looks pretty good. Okay. Now, each role can have a default access level. Are they a member to the project, or are they an administrator to a project? By and large, most people would just be members. The general paradigm there is you would want one person, maybe two, to be a project admin. So someone like a BIM manager by default would be a project admin. So that's where we set up roles. Ultimately, we're going to end up in project templates. I don't have any at the moment. Again, this is all under account administration. Library really is something that supports Revit more than anything else under shared parameters. And then there's a couple of other aspects that we're not going to be able to get into today, forms and cost management, that really actually suit the build product more than the docs product. There are integrations that you can use, and in order for you to connect that other application to docs, you need to enable these apps. So for instance, maybe you have a data collector running ArcGIS Pro, and then all I've got to do is install this connector. And then when I'm in ArcGIS Pro, I can now push data into my projects. So this is at the account level. So this will be available for all projects in the account. There's tons of apps in here. I wouldn't even begin to know which ones would necessarily be appropriate for you, but there's all sorts of things here. Goodness gracious. There's a Civil 3D app. There's a Depth XR for reality capture. Maybe you're using Drone Deploy, right? There's all sorts of connectors here. Maybe you've got a CAM set up for your project, right? So lots of apps in here. And all you've got to do is simply install it. It doesn't mean you necessarily have a license for that app. It just means that app can now get access once you do have a license. What if the thing that I use isn't in this list? Well, you can hire a programmer. There are programmers out there for Autodesk apps, and they can put that app in here as a custom integration. So that's the high level aspect of everything. Lastly, if I go to settings, these are the defaults here. If you ever need support from Autodesk and they need to know what account you're dealing with, the number for the account is here. This is sort of the unique ID, where the account name is just text. So for instance, if I don't want that account name, I can click edit and type a new name. We'll call it Lasso Enterprises. And so that's updated the page. It'll take 5 or 10 minutes to update up here. We'll check back a little later. What else can we do with the account settings? Do we want to allow project admins to add partner companies? Typically would be yes. If you set this to no, then the account admin has to do that, is what we're saying. Secondly, do we want to allow project admins to create projects and project templates? Again, if we set that to no, project admins can only do stuff once the project is created. That setting this to no would force the account admin to do those tasks. So again, typically both of these would be set to yes. Depending on the data you have in your account, you may be required to have a two-step verification process. So you can enable that here. Again, this is specific to the account, not to the individual users, whether that user has two-factor authorization or not for their own Autodesk account. I said lastly for settings, but clearly there's one more item down here. BIM 360 admin. What is this? So a little history. BIM 360 is essentially version 1 of the Construction Cloud platform. So there's a lot of commonality, a lot of crossover, but they are two distinct platforms. And essentially that platform is more of in a support mode at the moment. Some functionality is finding its way over there when it can easily be cross-purposed, but not everything is. All the development is happening in the Construction Cloud. But let's jump over there for 2 seconds. So I'll go to admin and click settings. Opens a new tab. First thing we're going to see is it looks completely different. BIM 360 has this blue ribbon across the top. Things are a little oriented across the top versus down the side. What can you do here from an account admin that you can't do in the Construction Cloud? Pretty much the same things. Projects, members, companies, roles. There's analytics here, but we'll take a look at that from the Construction Cloud viewpoint. One of the main things that people do here is set the image. So if I had an image here, let's just do a lasso image, right? Who knows? Perfect. That one looks good. So I'll save that one to the desktop. Downloads, let's just say logo. I simply come back to this icon to add an image. It's got to be in that format and it's got a max file size. We'll see how big my image is here in a moment. I'll grab my logo. There we go. Hit upload. And now there's my logo for my company. Where does that show up? It'll show up in your account selection. So let me hit the refresh there. There's my fancy little logo. Just the little details, right? And let me go back here. Notice that this still doesn't have a logo and it's got my old name. But when I flipped over to BIM 360, you notice the name has been updated. So let's give this a refresh and see what we get. Yep, there we go. Perfect. So that's an overview of the account area, as well as adding members to the account. Well, how is that different than going into a project? So I go to my project area. Here's my project list. I click on the project and it drops me right into the project admin for members, which also has a member area. For your company, if you added all your users to the account, does that mean all your users end up in every project? No. Maybe you've got departments in your account, maybe surveying, maybe mechanical design, and they're all going to have different projects. So we're not giving carte blanche access to anything. So what does that mean? It's what I would call a zero trust environment. You don't get access until I explicitly give it to you. So even though you're sort of in the building as an account member, I haven't given you access to the project just yet. So I can add that member, right? I can click add members, and there's my member, my account member. So once I type the email, I have to click enter down here, and now they're almost ready to get added. Notice it filled in the company and role for me, reading that from the account. I can change aspects here before I send an invitation. This is a bit of a misnomer. Sending an invitation doesn't mean they have to accept it. As soon as I click this button, they're part of the project. The invitation is just simply a notification that they've been added. And just like that, I now have a second member to this project. Pause a second. Let's go back to the account and look at members. And now we can see the status of that member is active. So there's the purpose of that particular column. You may have added account members out of the gate when you first set this up, but after 3 months, 3 years, whatever, you realize that they're not actually in any projects. So at that point, I probably would take them, revoke their access, and because they don't need the license. So I'm going to save some money, pull them off the platform, and give their license to somebody else that might need it. So just a quick update there on the status column. Let me jump back into the project here. So subtle difference there between account members and project members. Typically, the question would then be, does a project member have to be an account member? The answer to that is no. That's where our external stakeholders come into play. So maybe my surveying team is actually an external company altogether. So in that case, when I go to click add members, and again, I'm using a fake persona here, it's not going to recognize that person, right? It's an email address, that's fine. But when I go to click enter, right, there's nothing, it doesn't know the name or anything. So I'm going to leave these default names here for the moment. It's simply reading that from different sources. This would be, we'll call it surveyors. What am I saying? Something like that. I get a chance to set up their company. I hit add. What is their role? Now, I can't create a role like I did a company. In this, it's got to be in the list already. So at the moment, I'm going to leave their role blank, and I'll hit send invitation. There we go. So there is my second student. They are active, but their role is not yet there. So let me open the account here for a moment. Go back to my roles. Here's where I would add surveyor. Let's do field surveyor. If I could type correctly, let's try again. Field surveyor. There we go. And now when I go back to that role, to refresh the page, sorry. And let's make this column a little wider. There we go. There's my field surveyor. So there is some back and forth as you start to build out your first handful of projects. That's just going to be part of the process. All right, so some nuance there between adding members. Now, if I'm adding a member that's outside my company, I'm not giving them a license. They have to bring their own license. So when that person logs in to the project, they'll either be in a trial mode or maybe their trial's expired, and then they'll just have to buy a license to actually do anything inside the project. And that's typically how this works. So that whether they're invited to work on a project for us or for another firm, or they work for 10 different firms, right? They use their own license, that one single license everywhere. Which brings me to permissions and subscriptions and roles in general. So I've briefly talked about roles and how they can help standardize permissions and how to create this list. But in the project, where does that actually take effect? The first thing is this docs column, right? We want to make sure we give them access to docs in the project. So if I look at my user here, right, I've enabled docs for them. And so again, I'm not assigning permissions or products necessarily from this particular account. He's pulling his own license. All right, so what about permissions? I've given them access to the project. What can they do? Well, at this point, nothing. So from my module selector, let me go to docs right there. And this is, again, just a sample folder structure. If I come to the top here, right click and go to permissions, I can see who has access to this root level. And if I pick on a particular folder, I can see that no one's gotten access to anything. So as I add people, and I'll do this in sort of a simple way, I can add a name, I can add an email address, a role, or even a company. So I can add everybody in different methods. So maybe my architect, right? My prime architect's company, I'll add, but at the root level, I'll just allow them to view. But if I come down here to drawings, maybe they can edit. So you can pick and choose how that happens. I can even add the role architect. You saw that pop up there as well. So I can add a role to a folder. So that's the basic idea about permissions. Okay, so permissions, subscriptions, and roles. That's sort of the nutshell there. I do have settings inside of the project. I've got some other functionality inside of the project as well, but those are for the upcoming weeks. If I go to settings for the project, you can see we just have an ability to edit the general project information. So the project name, the address, etc. There's only a few bits here that are required. So the name is required. The type is required. There's a predefined list here of project types. This is used for that executive person that may want to filter based on a project type, so they can Maybe they see all the projects, but maybe they only want to see office projects. Maybe they just want to see residential projects, whatever the case is. Now, if your project list, type list is different than this, again, going back to that sort of customization that I mentioned at the account level, you can programmatically revise this list, but there isn't an area like there were for user roles to edit the types. These are out of the box. This is all you get. The other aspects here, start date, time zone, location, value, those all support different insights that we'll get to again in the coming weeks. So let's say it started today, but the end date is 3 years from now. Where's the address? Let's not use that address. I've used it a million times already. Let's use something. Let's use the art museum. So I'm in the Allentown area. I'm just going to copy their address. And where was it? There it is. So when you do this, I'm going to paste the whole thing. But notice if I just backspace, it's starting to fill in what it thinks is the address, so it's automatically providing it. Right, so there we go. I just pick that and it's going to fill in the location for me. And then I'll hit save. So those are the general settings there under Docs. Under the Files area, which is where most people start, there are settings there as well. So what can I do? I can scan for duplicate files, meaning a file with the same name. I can define attributes for the files. I can enforce a naming standard, and there's some advanced settings. So we'll jump on over there. So the first thing it does, it says, hey, where are we selecting and what are we comparing? And then it generates a report, and you can see that report in the reports area. Under attributes, here's the default attributes. These are simply the columns in the files area. You can certainly create your own. So is it a released version? Is it a work in progress version? Is it an outdated version? All that sort of stuff. So you can create your own attributes. Naming standard. Do you want to enforce a naming standard? There is a default ISO standard here that you can utilize. So if I take a look at that, what this means is if the file naming doesn't match that structure, then it gets held. But here, let me hit cancel and let's hit the ellipsis here. I can import a standard or I can download this template to create my own standard. What does that template look like? So there's simple instructions here, but there's tabs for every aspect of the standard to then modify. So they've done a great job if you want to customize this for your own company needs. What about advanced settings? Well, a couple of things. One of the features that we can do is provide public links to content for folks that don't have a license. Maybe they just need to see stuff. They're not necessarily going to comment. Maybe it's a link for a public meeting, right? So you can share that to the planning board or whatever. So we can certainly enable that. Do we want to show the folder path? Yes or no? Again, that's an option. And in sort of the permissioning, we have this ability to enhance one of those permissions. to edit values of the attributes on upload, yes or no. So that's set to off by default. So those are our settings for files. And if I just click at the files up here, or actually just in the navigation area, it'll take me back to the files display. Let me talk about some of the other areas. For instance, under reviews, this gives you the ability to submit a file for review and get approved, or return comments. Reviews utilize, I don't have anything to actually create a review, but let me go to settings to explain what that means. Oops, review settings. Sorry, I'll go to the right spot here in a moment. They all use what's called an approval workflow. The workflow starts from a template, meaning what's the basic concept here? Does it just need to get reviewed by one person, do a couple of people? And these are all in series, so the other person has to look at it before the next person. But there's also group scenarios. So maybe there's a group that could look at it, and then there's a final sign off. There's a couple of different options there. But if I just go to the one-step approval for just a quick example, so this would be, work in progress review. So weekly notes, shall we say? Who can initiate it? Well, we could say maybe anyone. Again, let's see. Where's my company? I'll say the role. I'll say any architect, lead, engineer. Actually, I guess I've only got, I'll just say all users. So you can assign people that can start this workflow. You assign who's going to review that workflow. And again, that could be a person or a role. And then how many days do I have to review that submission? Is that calendar days or work days? What are my options? Approved, rejected, approved or rejected with comments. You can even add your own customization there, maybe rejected with comments. And I've only got 3 comments there, or 3 icons. So you can, those are your different options. Of course, you can provide comments in the process. If it were just approved, I could say go ahead and put that into a released folder. I could pick that folder, etc. I could even have it iterate an attribute for that target folder, or the target folder and the source folder. So lots of details here just for the setup. So I'm missing a couple of details here. Let's just pick a source or destination. Let's say correspondence is our destination. So now I'm done setting up my workflow. I hit save. Actually, let me put me in there as an initiator too, right? Just so I can start the process. Now when I go back to the reviews area, I can create a review, pick the file. That's my first problem. I need to pick a file or files for review, and then I can initiate that workflow. So that's sort of a setup that happens in the background. The same thing could happen for issues. When I go to create an issue, we have status definitions. This is fixed, but the type we can edit, we can revise. So what types do I want available to my team? Again, this is just the out of the box list. This is revisable. So maybe I don't need a punch list section. Maybe I just need quality and design, maybe coordination. Maybe I need completely other types altogether, right? But that's something we can customize. So from a customization administration viewpoint, that's the one aspect we would modify here for issues. Now, when I do that, I'm doing that for this single project. I'm not doing it for the account. Projects live in their own sort of world. So when I create a project, we'll give it a name. We'll call it sample 2. And we'll give it a type. When I do that, it's a whole new set of structure. So I'll give myself access to docs. And in the background, it's building. If I go to docs now, it's probably going to burp me out. Yeah, it's not quite ready yet. There we go. But notice there's 0 folders here, starting from scratch. So every project when you start you start from scratch. That's why I'm saying it takes a few projects to get things figured out to what you want. Once you do that, once you have an idea for, what a standard project might look like, that's when you would get to project templates and create what's called a project template from an existing project. So we'll just say typical office building, and we'll use this sample project as the source. This isn't a reference, it's doing a copy, if you will. So then my project becomes the typical office building project template, where I can add members, and then I can configure the different aspects of the project template. So I'll put myself in here as a project admin. I'll click add. So it's a little slightly different interface, but we're doing the same thing. So again, I could give myself a role. And when I go to configuration, that just shows the members and notifications. I'll come back to notifications. But in my module selector, when I go to docs, it looks like I'm going to a project, but I'm going to the project template docs. So do I want to publish the template? Typically, you would say yes to that. And then in these different areas, how do we want to standardize them? So since I used that other project as a source, right, here's all my folders. I can go to my permissions, add. The only thing I can add here is roles. So if I say architect, right, what's my architectural lead allowed to do? We'll just set them to edit. And now that permission is applied to that folder. So in the template, we can only add roles. Roles become very important for that reason. Same thing for the reviews and issues, right? We can define our workflows for those in settings, right? So I can go through and configure all of that, and that's my project template. So for instance, what if I didn't want this commissioning to be active? I'll just make it inactive. Sure, that's fine. Maybe I don't need this. Warranty's already inactive. Safety, inactive. Yeah, that's fine. Punch list, inactive. Observation. Yeah, let's get rid of that. Needs observation, don't need that. Anyway, so you can customize what's here, turn it off, or you can create your own categories and types. But in the instance of time here, let's just say I'm done. I would go back to the account, create my project, and we'll say sample from template. And right here is where I would specify that template. Hit create, off it goes. It's not instantaneous. Again, it does take a few moments. So give it some grace. Working in a desktop application world, we're used to things being instant. So there's a bunch of stuff happening on a server somewhere. So just give it a moment. So that's the nutshell from starting all the way through project templates. Last thing I want to talk about here while all of this is publishing is I'm going to go back to my, let's go back to my account, and we'll go into the construction sample and take a look at notifications here real quick. So look at monitoring of the project. We have what are called notification groups, and there's two here out of the box, opt-out and default. So opt-out is saying for all the different tools and notification types across the entire platform, do not notify. So you may assign that to maybe your PMs or your owners that are included in your projects. And maybe default, again, as a starting point, it's all set to various settings depending on frequency. So for instance, let's go down here to files. If a file's added, and I've subscribed to that folder, go ahead and let me know that that has changed. If I've been given an issue, notify me those on an hourly basis, etc. And then you can assign that to a team. So for instance, here, let's just make one. We'll say CAD users. We'll just call it that. And I'll say that is my surveyors. I'll just assign it to the company. I could assign it to the role, right? It's all the same stuff here. But I'm assigning those folks to that group, and then people that match that company or group now get their frequencies set based on this group of settings. So that's pretty cool. Now, the one part here that I mentioned you have to subscribe. What does that mean? That's only for the files aspect. So if I go back into my files area, and let's just say the drawings folder, if I right click, you can see there's lots of options here: share, rename, etc. But hidden down here under more is subscribe. So this allows me to get notifications about changes to that folder. This allows individuals to get granular about specific folders or subfolders. So users have to do that for the individual folders. The remaining notifications follow whatever group they're assigned to. And that's it for notifications. Under activity, we can see various things that have happened. This is helpful when a user says, hey, lost a file, or I can't this doesn't seem right, or whatever the situation is, there's a transparent log here to project admins to see what's happened. Bridge is the last sort of monitoring aspect. Bridging allows you to synchronize data across projects. As an example, maybe your current project is phase 1 and you want to start another project. So that would be phase 2. It would be great for us to see the phase 1 buildings in phase 2. So I can sync that data to a project. That synchronization, that bridge can be one way or two ways. That's completely up to you when you walk through this bridge process. Again, this is typically done by project admins. Some account admins would do it. That sort of goes back to that first set of toggles. How involved do we want account admins in the day-to-day? Every company is going to say, nope, I just want the account admin to do that. The other companies are going to go, nah, the account admin's fine. We'll let the project admins take care of that. So completely subjective. So that's the top to bottom there for project and account admin. Now let's go back to, the account admin for a second. And let's take a look at our sample from template. Everything should be fully populated now. So if we go into our docs, there's the folders, right? And if I go into issues, we said, we changed, right? So now some of those things are now not in the list, right? I just took things out of the list. There we go. So those were our 6 primary keys to administrating the Autodesk Docs platform.